Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where Dan Maisey and Rory Stewart Richardson dive into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. Morning. This week we're excited to have Murray Barnett on the show, a distinguished figure in sports broadcasting and the commercial sector, with a career that includes pivotal roles at F1, World Rugby and ESPN. Murray has been at the forefront of sports media rights management, sponsorship and direct-to-consumer strategies. As the founder of 26 West Sport and director at D2C Sport, his expertise spans across negotiating landmark deals and reshaping sports media landscapes. Join us as Murray shares his insights from his illustrious career, offering unique perspectives on recruitment and talent strategy in the ever-evolving world of sports, media and entertainment. Murray, welcome to Talent Talks. How are you?
I'm doing great. That was a fantastic introduction. I didn't recognize myself.
If you want, you can have that for your LinkedIn as well. So we'll give that one to you for free. So let's get straight into it. We asked this to each of our guests to begin with. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired? And do you have any lessons learned?
Well, actually, I think aside from your sort of knowledge or expertise of a particular field that you're in, recruitment is probably the single most important thing that you do, because without talent, you're nothing. So both incredibly rewarding when you get it right, but also very disappointing when you don't, and comes with a certain amount of stress when you're actually making those decisions about, whether you've got the right person, and you don't know until they actually start often. So it's always a kind of nerve-wracking process.
Yeah. How do you mitigate that as much as possible when you are hiring? Because it's time, but it's also money as well that we think about when we hire. And if we get it wrong, that costs the organization that we work for. So what's the best way, or how have you mitigated that challenge?
Well, I think firstly, when you put together sort of job specs or kind of roles and responsibilities for a particular position, that's only half of it. And the approach I've always taken is, yes, you've got to try and find a certain set of skills, but ultimately you're looking to attract the right people. And so often I found that you recruit somebody that has a lot of the skills you're looking for. Quite often you end up tweaking and shaping the role for the right characters. And to me, that's the most important thing is, 50% of it, if you like, is your experience or the candidate's experience for the role. Then the other 50% is sort of cultural fit and how you feel that you're going to be able to work with them and how they're going to fit in with the rest of the organization, both in terms of, personality, but also you very rarely find somebody that is absolutely, the brief of what you're looking for 100%. And so I think you've got to have that level of flexibility in terms of giving yourself the wiggle room to say, look, I think I've got the right character and the right person with a lot of the skills, but then after I've hired them, I'm going to slightly reshape a little bit to play to their strengths.
And Murray, just on that one, so you've obviously built sort of a very successful career in sales within sport. Just want to discuss on your sort of point about hiring the right talent. Do you feel, and I know Dan, the best salesperson he ever worked with, didn't actually come from sport. How much of a pivotal point is it that if you are looking for a commercial person to sit underneath you, who you will have a great network behind you, but they come with huge ambition, energy, ability to sell. How important for you is it for them to have particularly sector relevant experience?
It always depends a little bit exactly what the role is, because obviously if something's a little bit more senior, you need to have somebody that's got those kind of contacts and that ability within their sort of portfolio, if you like. But I recently hired a pretty junior role, and it was somebody that had no experience, even though we had actually been looking for somebody with a little bit of experience. And what impressed me about them was that they had that right sort of character and the right level of sort of confidence, if you like, because personal confidence is kind of like a bit of an aphrodisiac in the sense that you want somebody that's got that can make the decisions for themselves. You don't want to have somebody who you're hiring, whether it's senior or junior for that matter, but you don't want to have somebody that doesn't have any kind of direction or ability to think for themselves. And so, if somebody walks in and has got a lot of personal confidence, and it's not cocky, but it's sort of an enthusiasm and an understanding of who they are, I think that that's a really important aspect, because even if they are maybe not exactly the right skill set for what you've got, it breeds this feeling that they can learn quickly and that they're frankly going to make you look good. And it sounds a bit weird to say it, but I think that's always the key thing I'm looking for. Is there somebody that's going to make me look good? Is it somebody that's going to be additive to the skills that I have? Is it somebody that's going to challenge what I do? And, I always say the same thing about what I do, which is that we're not, heart surgeons or, clear scientists. This is something which isn't just about having a particular set of skills. It's having the right personality, the right level of confidence, the right sort of, for want of a better expression, sort of get up and go about them. And so I'm always looking for those more emotional characteristics rather than what's on the paper, because it's quite easy. By the time you get to interview somebody, you've kind of filtered out the people that definitely don't have the skill set that you're looking for. One of the things I like to try and do is, when I get to that sort of final stage of interviewing, I always try and have one candidate in there that's a bit left field. So yes, you've looked at things which are exactly how you've written out in the job spec and matched up with their CV and so on. But then I always try and put one person in who, maybe it's a little bit of a challenge to myself of like, they're not exactly what I think I'm looking for, but they're going to give me a different counterpoint to the other candidates that I've shortlisted. And, often I found that ends up being the person that I end up going for, because everybody can have a certain level of technical skill and ability, but it's that kind of X factor that you're looking for.
Awesome. Then just sort of kind of going back to your career. So you've obviously worked with some of the biggest rights holders, if not with F1 being probably the biggest rights holder you've experienced and done very well with. You've also worked with startups. Through your personal experience, has your process changed? Because obviously in a big corporate environment, a bit like F1, you're sort of there to very much do a job, but in maybe a smaller startup, you've got to spin many plates. So is your recruitment process the same? Doesn't matter how big or how small the company is.
I think probably when you're working for a big organization, whether that's an F1 or a, ESPN, Disney or whatever, the risk factor is a little bit bigger. You've got more at stake, if you like, because it's not just about you. When you're in a startup or a small organization, you're less answerable to other people, I guess is the best way of saying it. And you have more control over the process. So in a funny sort of way, it's actually much more difficult at big organizations, because there are so many more factors that you have to take into consideration. And it's not just about sort of how you feel, but as a sort of general rule of thumb, yes, you look for or at least I've looked for the technical skills, but more importantly, I'm always looking for the brands that people have worked for, because that often plays to what their character is like. And I'll give you an example. So I started off my sports career at the NBA, and the NBA had an incredibly sort of rigorous process around the way that you worked and how you had to do everything, incredibly detailed. And it was a great training ground. And so by way of example, if I see that somebody's worked at the NBA, it's a shorthand for sort of a certain perspective and skill set that they're going to have, because I know what that organization's like. And also to a certain degree, you can shorthand the experience. You can shorthand what they've written on their CV by the experiences that they've had. So, as a first pass, that's often, whether it's a big organization or a startup, I'm sort of scanning down to see what their experience has been and what that means to me in terms of what I know about those organizations.
Awesome. And how have you, just sort of kind of building on from that, and particularly of the scanning of CVs, which I'm sure is a very arduous process, but a must process. Have you changed your recruitment process with the sort of introduction of technology? Obviously, LinkedIn is a big play now, but how have you utilized tech to sort of streamline the recruitment process, or how do you just go on sort of what you've always done?
Good question. I haven't really engaged with tech in terms of thinking about the recruitment process differently. I think it's a very, as I said earlier, it's kind of a very emotional thing, and you're looking for that sort of emotional EQ with somebody. So I guess I try and be sort of quite, going to say manual. I'm not sure that's the right word, but I don't sort of engage in sort of any kind of filtering by keywords and stuff like that, because I still want to read the CV to kind of try and get a sense of the character of the people that I'm about to interview. I mean, the one thing that is almost guaranteed to not get you a job if you're working for me is anybody that puts on a covering letter, I love sport, because that is like, number one, that's a given. We all love sport, or else we wouldn't be working in it, and people wouldn't be applying for jobs if they didn't like the industry. In fact, I almost have more respect for people that say that they're somewhat indifferent about it, but they like the role. That to me is somebody that's actually really looked at what that job is and said, I think I've got the right skill sets to be successful in that role. But, there's always this feeling, especially, it still happens tends to be at more junior roles, is that people, even if they don't write it like this, that they have this assumption that all you do is talk about sport all day long and the results and going to sport events at the weekend. And, I'm not saying that there isn't some of that, but that's not why you should be doing the job. Conversely, if somebody says to me, look, I'm fascinated about the business of sport, then I get that. And that's absolutely spot on. But, people know that I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan. Anybody that says, oh, you should hire me because I'm a Spurs fan. I mean, it's like, that's crazy, right?
Just a quick one of that. If someone they're an Arsenal fan on their CV, is that straight in the bin, or is that?
No. I mean, interestingly enough, and I know that you've got sort of a few quick fire questions at the end, but one of the things I'm always looking for is sort of half of it is the complementary skills to mine. I'm not looking for a clone of me, because that would be a bit pointless. But I'm always looking at somebody that can challenge me. And, I certainly am not a hater of Arsenal fans, but, it almost points to that thing about like, it's challenging if people are making you think about things in a different way. And as I said earlier, it's not rocket science. So I'm always looking for people that are going to challenge the status quo and are going to say, why do we do things this way? Or, can you explain to me why you made that decision? And sometimes it happens in an interview. Some people say like, oh, I'll say, have you got any questions? And they'll say, oh, can you talk me through your thought process around such and such an agreement or whatever? And I really like that, because I think nobody has a lock on good ideas, and it's really important to have people that are challenging the way that you think about things. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a fear in interviews about saying the wrong thing, but I've often hired candidates who have said completely the wrong thing in an interview because it's outside their knowledge set, or they don't understand the detail of a particular situation. But the fact that they've actually thought it through and come up with a really strong perspective on why we should have done something a certain way, or, I've given them an exercise to do and they've come back and it's completely wrong, but it's a well thought out proposition, that's a really good thing. And I think if anybody was interviewing, I'd say that that's sort of a key factor, is just have confidence and the sort of courage of your convictions, and don't be afraid about sort of making the wrong, answering questions the wrong way or anything like that. Because the whole interview process, for me at least, is you're already having an interview. I've already got past your sort of technical abilities, if you like, and I'm now looking to get a sense of your character. And I'd much prefer you to be completely open and honest and get things wrong, and be authentic, if you like, rather than trying to say the right thing. And you have a good sense of when somebody is not being authentic, or, trying to just say the right thing. And that is often a real turn off.
Well, I'll go back to a point you made just a minute ago around it's not always about loving sport. I read an article recently around someone hires because they don't like sport, because you're bringing that extra element, an extra kind of additional piece of the puzzle into the business. You're not there to, as I said earlier, you're not there to kind of sit and talk about sport. But what you do is you bring in experience from elsewhere that can enhance the business side of what you're doing. And I think that's quite clear of what you're saying and what's coming across. I want to dive in a little bit. You've mentioned values and character quite a lot. It's obviously very important to you when you hire. You've got the skill set, skills can be learned, the sector, the industry can be learned. Dive into a little bit more around the values and character side of things. What are the key values that you look for when you're hiring?
Honesty is obviously a very key one. I mentioned confidence earlier, and I like people that have an opinion about what they do and how they do it. And I think that you're also want to, I mentioned EQ earlier, that's a really important thing, because 50% of any recruitment has to be about the cultural fit, especially if you're hiring into an existing team. You're going to spend 8 hours a day with them, 5 days a week. So you want to know that they're going to be somebody that's going to get on well with the rest of the team. And indeed, there's been a couple of times in the past where I've been recruiting somebody and I thought, what, you're going to be you would be a great fit for this role, but you're just not going to fit in with the team. And that's a really important thing for me, that they're going to have that right rapport and that right relationship with their colleagues, because that is crucial to have a high functioning team.
Yeah, agreed. And let's flip it slightly and talk about your experience of being hired. Have you been in processes with recruitment agencies, been in processes that are direct with companies themselves? Where have you found things that ultimately could be improved? What are the really good things that you've had in the past for some of the roles that you've gone for, and just understand your experience on that front?
With recruitment companies, they vary. Some are better than others, of course. And the thing that I would, and I'm probably stealing the thunder for some of your questions at the end, but one of my frustrations with recruitment companies when you're looking for a role is their lack of honesty. And this lack of honesty is probably the wrong terminology, but it's this point about just tell me if I'm not right for the role, and please also try and give me some feedback so that I can be more mindful about the kind of things I should be going for, or the different aspects of my character or my experience that are not appealing to somebody that's looking to fill a particular position. And I think sometimes they're worried about hurting your feelings, or they feel a little bit reticent to be very open. And sometimes I guess they don't get the feedback from the client. But, there've been a couple of processes I've been involved in, over the years, where it's felt like a sort of a long road towards impending doom. And you just prefer them to just be completely blank, completely upfront with you about why you're not right for this. And that's probably a frustration I have with most of them.
And also, I think just sort of kind of mirroring on from that, the lack of communication. So I'm a big believer, as long as you know where you stand, that's fine. But I've, over the last sort of 3 or 4 months, had a couple of mates who've been applying for big organizations, and they've just been sort of left high and dry in the recruitment process. They don't know whether they've got it, and they don't know whether, where they stand. And I think that's certainly been a trend on some of the previous podcasts that we've sort of recorded, of when people of senior positions have gone through the ranks and used recruitment companies, is that sort of lack of knowing where you stand sort of kind of in the process.
Yeah. And it would be slightly better when you're working directly with a company instead of going through a recruitment. But to be honest with you, the best processes are almost ones where there isn't a process. I've been lucky that a number of times it's just getting the tap on the shoulder. And I'm not suggesting that they haven't gone through a process, but you get to a certain sort of notoriety, if you like, within the industry, where they've gone through some kind of process, kind of behind the scenes, if you like, and then they're just kind of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, let's go out for lunch, or let's go for a drink, or whatever. And not that they're offering you the job up front, but you're getting the sense that this is a more a don't screw it up situation rather than an actual process. And that definitely is the nicest sort of recruitment process to be involved in, because you kind of know that you're not in competition. And, it's interesting talking about it in the sports business, that we are all competitive, and especially in the sports business. And so when you hear from a recruiter, oh, you're down to the last three, in your head, you almost can't stop thinking, well, I don't really want the bronze medal. I want the gold medal. And sometimes I think you have to kind of take a step back. And, I always take the view that like any job I didn't get, they weren't right for me as much as I wasn't right for them, and trying not to dwell on it too much. Obviously you want to try and learn something from it and move forward. But I always think that there's that thing about not to sort of feel that that you failed or you didn't get the gold medal. It's actually, they're telling you that you're in the wrong event.
It's quite interesting. My next question was actually going to be on sort of on the negative side of things, but I think you sort of answered it on how you deal with not necessarily getting the right job and the sort of resilience to sort of pick yourself back up and sort of push it aside. Like you just said, of it wasn't right for me. And then you sort of go on another journey as such. But flip it on its head, when you've been in a position of hiring and you've had to give the bad news, how do you sort of make it as sweet as possible when they haven't got it?
It's a good question. I generally try and offer support to the candidates that didn't get it, because, by the time you get down to that last, whatever it is, 2, 3, 4, they're all pretty good people. And so a couple of times I've actually said to them sort of on the quiet, look, you're not right for this role, but I know that so-and-so is hiring for something, and I think you would be a good fit. Would you like me to make an introduction or so on? Because as I said, like by the time they get to that level, it's fine margins between different people, because you've kind of already worked out they've got the technical ability. Chances are that once you're, depending on how complicated the process has been, that they are also of a decent character or could do the role. And so I always try and, number one, be very straightforward. Number two, give some feedback. And then, like I said, number three, see if I can offer any support and help for future roles. And also it's happened before that I've not hired somebody for a position, but I've liked them. And then 6 months later, we're hiring for another role. And I mean like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to go back to that person.
Got you. So Murray, just a quick one. I know time is valuable in your space. As you alluded to earlier, there are 3 quickfire questions, of which I think you already answered one already, but just slim it down into one sentence if you can, just while we sort of wrap this up. First and foremost, the most frustrating thing about recruitment.
People who say they love sport.
And you don't have to mention them, but your best hire and why.
So I've been lucky that in 2 or 3 different roles, I've actually hired people to come with me, if you like. So there are 2 people that I can think of who have followed me to 2 or 3 different organizations. Maybe not immediately, but I've been in a position where I've always had them in mind to bring them on to another role. And, I kind of touched upon it earlier. It's what those people have done have been that they challenged me about the way that we do things, and also are looking to do things differently. But they also have complementary skills to me. And again, it's this whole thing about, and it sounds a bit egotistical, but it's about making you look good. When you hire people, the nicest compliment you get is when other people in the organization say, oh, had a chat to so-and-so, or was in a meeting with so-and-so, they're really good, or they made some really interesting points. And then you have that massive relief that you've actually made a really great hire. But it's the complementary skills, it's being challenged, and it helping you to look good.
Awesome. And then last but not least, one thing that you would change about the recruitment world.
Well, I'm going to go for 2. So the first one is that you feel a lot of pressure when you start a recruitment process to have a successful outcome at the end of it. And so I think this is not quite answering your question, but it's also having that courage to actually say at some point, I have not found the perfect candidate, so I am going to put this on hold and try again in a couple of months, or I'm going to try a different avenue for recruitment. And actually, when you work with the recruiters, difficult for them to be incentivized to do that. So, it would probably be more realistic feedback from recruitment agencies to say, look, actually, I don't think we've actually the right person for you, or, we're going to have to look at the brief and tweak it a little bit to see if we can elicit the right people. And those are the best recruiters, the ones that sort of come at it slightly tangentially and give you those, slightly left field candidate to kind of help you understand what it is that you're wanting. And that would be my second point, is that they often don't spend enough time really understanding what you want.
Awesome. Murray, well,
Brilliant.
you've been absolutely fantastic. And I've learned a lot. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Murray. Appreciate it.